All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the G
G
G
G K.
A R.
Oh,
All right.
wow. We really need to tighten that up, Philip. We really need to tighten that
That's a
up.
little sad, but we've only
9 books in, we still haven't gotten
had
the perfect.
nine tries. I'm gonna retire my pom poms right now. But anyway, we're back and we are discussing The Last Light of the Sun, which is the ninth book in publication order of not only Guy Gavriel Kay's oeuvre, but also the GGGKR, because we're doing them in publication order. And I'm so excited to be talking with my guests today, Erin and Johanna, and as usual, of course, Evan and I are ready to rumble here. Um,
Partners in crime.
we are going to start with the non-spoiler assessments of everybody, and we'll do our usual thing when we are starting with the spoilers. But I'm going to begin with the three of you, and then I'm going to do my non-spoiler. I'm going to share a couple poems because that I have to because this book is really the most in my wheelhouse of all the GGK books that have been written so far. So I
I
have
tried to read this from Philip's perspective to really just,
yeah
like get
yeah.
into it even more.
Yeah, yeah.
It helped.
I will. I'll save it for my non-spoiler stuff. But I had a good time. So
I bet this is totally down your wheelhouse, right? I was
yeah,
thinking about of you the whole entire time. I thought, oh, Philip is going to love this book. Yeah.
that's a pretty safe prediction. Uh,
hmm
but anyway, let's get going with our non-spoiler thoughts. Aaron, would you please lead us off?
Sure. Thanks. And thanks for having me here. This is really exciting. I was really excited to do this one in particular because I haven't read it since it was published. So coming back to sort of reread it, however many years that is, I think it was 2004 it came out. Um, I really was eager to revisit it because I remember not loving it when I read it back then. And I'll definitely have some things to talk about a little bit, but definitely the reread. Maybe it's just I'm older, more mature, I don't know, but I really enjoyed it. So I'm really looking forward to our
Oh, yay.
conversation.
All right.
Um, and I just wanted to sort of pick up a couple of things, I guess, which is what stood out to me and what I liked about this so much. And one of it was like, I really noticed in this one how it's not just the importance of the historical period to the world building and narrative, but also the genres from that period. And I'm sure, Philip, you're going to be talking about this a lot, but I feel like this one stands out even more so than in like the other novels that you've read so far. And the only one I really think of is sort of I think back to our conversation about Fiona when we were talking about how romance and early modern romance sort of affected that. I feel like there's something similar with this one, so I'm excited to get into that. Um, and of course, the fairy realm. I love fairy and everything's to do with fairies, so I'm really hoping we talk about that. And there's lots of other things, but I think I'm just going to leave it there to leave lots of space for others to pick things up. But I will sort of say, and we can talk about this maybe, but I was disappointed in the women characters
Hmm.
a little bit. And so I look forward to sort of diving into that and hearing what others thought, because there are some past ones, like for instance in Lines of Alrasan, which of course we all talked about, that I loved. The main female character in that, and a number of the other ones. But yeah, here they just they felt a little flat for me, which is a bit disappointing.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Aaron. And Joanna, you're up next. What are your, I already heard some on your video recently, but I'd love to hear your full non-spoiler thoughts now.
I'll do my best to follow that. I will say this. I think this is what I said pretty much in my video is that I like this book. I think I felt engaged when I read it. And at the same time, I didn't feel like this was for me the most memorable K work. In fact, even a couple of days after finishing it, I was struggling to remember character names and some of the larger, more important moments of the story. It was for some reason, it just didn't feel as tight for me as previous K works. Yet at the same time, I'm really glad that I read this when I did. And I'm so excited to join you all because I know for one that you're going to enrich my appreciation of this book. I have no doubt about that, especially with the poems that Philip is going to be reading. But as I am not Alan, but the other thing is that and I
We're
like
gonna do a
poetry.
purely Yeats video with just Alan reading all his entire.
I bought a Yeats book after the Sarantine Mosaic, if that tells you anything.
Yeah.
But yeah, I so the thing about this book is that what I loved about it was seeing how it fits in conversation with Kay's other books. Because I think something that we've largely been talking about with Kay's books, and that has stood out to me for some time, is the role of art in his stories, the role of humanities, of poetry, of song, and how these aspects of humanity are important. And they're not only important, of course, for their own sake because they are important for their own sake. They're like an emblem of what it means to be human, but also they're so important for passing down history in one way or another. And I know there could be some ways in which that's not always accurately representing history. I know there's conversation for that too. But I found it really interesting, especially in contrast to the Sarantine Mosaic, because in the Sarantine Mosaic, there's so much about memorializing legacy through art, through mosaics or statues. And in this part of the world, which it takes place in a different time, if I understand correctly, it's weird because he does mention places from sailing to Sarantium and from
It's several
Sarantium
hundred
and
years after sailing to
Yeah.
Sarantium.
yeah. And so, but this in this part of the world, it's so much more rugged. It's so much more austere. Even the last light of the sun, it's like the edge of the world, so to speak. And I thought it was really interesting to think about what he's doing with the prose, even when it comes to that. But also, I thought it was interesting that we don't get art memorializing the same way that we do in the Sarantine Mosaic. We don't have this grandiose display of architecture and art that is memorializing things the same way, but we do have the importance of saga and song, which can still fall short at times for capturing things. And I think so much of the storyline to me was trying to give honor to if certain acts of heroism that might not be passed down historically, that might go otherwise forgotten. And of course, we bring up the role of memory and what we choose to remember or what we can remember, and how maybe we don't have choice over that. So I did appreciate that. With the female characters, I'm really excited to talk about that because I think there is actually quite a bit I have in mind when it comes to the role of that, especially in contrast to the Serengeti Mosaic, which I mentioned in that review. And and yeah, I think there's also so much beauty in it when it comes to the realm of fairy. I'm also looking forward to that discussion as well.
Yeah, another point I really liked that you made, Joanna, in your video earlier was the intersection of lives. This is a big K-ism, the intersection of stories and lives, and how minor characters will come across the main story, and then we kind of get the short version of the rest of their lives, that kind of thing. And you mentioned that in your video. I thought you put it really well there.
Yeah, there's a specific quote, if you don't mind me taking time. Let's see if I can find it. I think it's on page
Sure.
145.
Okay.
I could be wrong about that. But there was a specific Kayist quote, if you will. There are several Kayist quotes in this book. And actually, oh man, I think I got the wrong page, so I probably won't be able to find it. But there is a specific Kayist quote where he talks uh, about that intersection of lives and paths, but also how there are lives that live their own sagas. And I think he was trying to give us a little wink or nod to the fact that he does this throughout the novel. He brings up little side stories of people who intersect with the main narrative, but maybe don't have a huge role to play in that main narrative. A couple of them maybe do. But the thing I found really interesting about that is that the majority of these characters uh, happen to be women. They happen to be female characters.
All right.
And I found that interesting because one of my issues with the Sarantine Mosaic is that I found that the majority of the townspeople that we were highlighting, maybe not all, but I felt like the vast majority of them were male characters. And so I did appreciate that we were giving a bit more attention to female characters, especially female characters, which time would forget. Some of them do play heroic roles in the story. In fact, there are quite a few heroic moments with female characters in this story now that I think about it. And at the same time, their lives are harsh. It's again that harsh, rugged part of the world and time that we're seeing that these are women that probably lived. I mean, there were probably women who lived such lives that weren't easy. And so I don't know. I think that that was what he was trying to do with that, but I'd be curious to hear what you all think.
Yeah. He talks about that a lot and in conjunction with it, sort of the clarity of hindsight through which we weave the story out of what events have happened, right? We give the story a more linear narrative and that kind of thing. We make it more coherent, perhaps, you know. Um,
Yeah. And I
yeah.
also want, I guess another quick question, sorry, is also when it comes to the sagas, I guess, I mean, what would you say, Philip, with your experience with sagas? Would you say that they are a bit more focused on male characters, or do you think there's a good insertion of female characters? I've only
Uh,
read one.
I think the fair answer there is you can find some really great female characters in the sagas, some really vibrant, very powerful female characters. That said, there probably is more focus on male characters overall, but you will find some really fantastic female characters in the sagas for sure. Yeah. So, Evan, what are your non-spoiler thoughts on The Last Light of the Sun?
So, first of all, we have to revisit like a lot of the stuff that Joanna said because that was a wonderful non-spoiler thoughts. And there's so many things that we could pick up on there. So please don't forget any of that. And I would love to talk about so much of that. And I love what you had to say too, Erin. When I'm trying to evaluate a book, I try to keep two things in mind always. First, I try to judge a book for what it is and not for what I want it to be. I often have this experience, and maybe you're familiar with it, where I'm reading a book and then it occurs to me another way the story could be told, a way that it might, have worked better or a way that I might have liked better. And then all of a sudden, I'm starting to judge the book that's actually in my hands against this imaginary book that doesn't exist. So I try the best I can to understand a book for what it is and not for what it isn't. And the second thing I always try to keep in mind is that connecting with the characters in the sense of feeling sort of an empathetic bond is not the end all be all of a book's quality as it's so often treated. There are lots of other ways that a story can be interesting, that a character can be interesting, and dismissing a book because you didn't like the protagonist or didn't feel that bond with the character, I find is often a shallow form of criticism. That said, I'm going to be shallow right now. Uh, that was my preamble for me being a little shallow here. The Last Light of the Sun is a fine book, maybe even a good book, but it wasn't the book that it wasn't the kind of book that I wanted to be. It wasn't the book, it didn't have the characters that I really wanted to connect with. Going into it, I wasn't completely sure that we were going to have two really important carryovers from the Sarantine Mosaic. And two of those are one we talked about extensively for Lord of Emperors was the commenting omniscient narrator. And we did a close reading of that for the Sarantine Mosaic. That appears again here quite a bit. And the second one is a lot of viewpoint characters. There's a lot of characters. We start with that merchant from Al Rasan, and I was like, oh, cool. We're gonna see a Viking tale through the eyes of an Asherite, trader. But then we never see him again, or we never get a, we never get a viewpoint from him again. And then we get the introduction to Byrne. And right away, I felt involved with Byrne. He's because we're in action with him. One of the reasons I didn't really connect with Crispin from Sailing to Sarantium is because the action element wasn't as strong. And so you can still connect to a character in any way, of course, but having a character absconding from his town where he was a slave and he's on the run, and you're with him, riding along with him, that's a way to connect with him. But then we get introduced to character after character after character, and we return to Byrne, of course, but not enough, I think, for me. As Bilbo Baggins once said, it's butter scraped over too much bread. No bite had enough butter for me, and I was in the mood for butter. So There are lots of memorable scenes here. I like the vignettes of the marginal characters, like Johanna was talking about, and I'm sure we'll talk more about. There are, as always, really big themes, but the last light of the sun didn't keep my interest up as much as Tigana or Song for Arban or Lines of Al Rassan. But there I go comparing to a book that it isn't. Again, I look forward to hearing what you guys have to say about it, and I'm sure there are lots of great things to talk about, and I'm excited to.
All right.
Can I just jump in for a second
Go
there?
ahead.
Because one thing that I actually noticed and agree with is like this is one of the first K books where I wish it was like 100 pages longer
Hmm.
or something. Like once it was done, like I wanted more of particularly the central people, right? Like I love
Yeah.
the little vignettes that are just vignettes. I don't need more of those, but I did want more of the central characters, and I felt like we could have spent more time in this world. So it's a rare thing to say like I want this fantasy book to be longer, but this was the first time I was like, no, I really wish it was longer.
Yeah, I mean, he's trying to do three full cultures in one book, and it was somewhere around the middle where they started introducing the kids of Eldred or one of the characters. I was like, okay, there's five. I was like, okay, there's five of these kids, four of these kids. Who are they? And I keep track of them. Okay, what happened to Byrne? No, no, we're not talking about him. Who is Thorkel again? So it's like it was just a little too much. And I agree with you, Aaron. Like maybe more time or a second book might have helped me there. That said, in Lord of Emperors, he does this thing where he's trying to do a mosaic of a whole society. And that's clearly what he's trying to do here as well. And so you can see that, like, and maybe I'm misremembering, but I don't think it was as extreme in the previous books like Lions and Arbonne. I know there are quite a few characters, but it seems like specifically with Lord of Emperors and Last Light of the Sun, he's looking for a very long, very broad view of the culture with a lot of small little pieces of it to make a larger picture, which is fine. Like I said, I wasn't, I just wasn't in the mood for that. I wanted to turn the page. I wanted to dive into some of the characters here, and I felt like I didn't get enough of that.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say the omniscient narrator was asserting itself more strongly
Yeah.
in this book than in previous ones. But I think I had a slight advantage here in knowing in terms of feeling a sense of connection with the characters. I already knew Aldred because I am very familiar with Alfred the Great, and clearly that's the model for Aldred in here. I already knew even minor characters like you mentioned, Firaz ibn Bakir, who is clearly based on Ibn Fadlan, who was a ninth century chap from Baghdad who journeyed all over the place on a diplomatic mission, ended up witnessing a Viking ship funeral among the Rus. And that's a very famous account, which it turns up in all kinds of places. But I kind of knew this guy as soon as I saw him. I said, "Oh, okay, I know who this is." So that might have been an advantage in a sense because I didn't need more page time with them. I already felt like I knew who they were in a way. Um, but yeah, that's one way of saying that. I felt very excited to read this book because of my own background being a medievalist. My specialty is really Old English poetry, but I've done a fair bit with Old Norse, and also I do know some Welsh. I was very excited for this, and I actually was a little worried because I felt that Guy Gavriel Kay's voice was just perfect for a song for Arbonne, for example. And that he has a very poetic, beautiful prose style that I just love. And I was a little worried because is that going to fit with the Viking vibe? Is that going to fit with even the Anglo-Saxons? It was perfect for the Welsh, actually. I thought that he nailed the Celtic part of this, was my favorite, probably, I would say overall, because he just nailed his voice was perfect for those portions. And I thought he did a great job also with even the Viking stuff, where I personally, picture it with a more bleak. They're not that they don't have a sense of beauty in the Eddic poems and that sort of thing. It's there, but it's a more stark kind of beauty, I would say. He just did a wonderful job. I was fully engrossed, having a great time. Rather than gush more and more about that, I do want to share a couple things with you guys, if you'll indulge me for a bit. Very short excerpts. He didn't bring in a lot of Old English poetry in here. He brought more of the history of Alfred, really. There are major portions of Aldred's story that are you can map straight onto Alfred's story. That whole thing about that little island in the middle of the swamp being that last bastion, and all that's straight out of Alfred's story. All that. So there's a lot of historical references in Aldred's portions, particularly. But he did bring in the poetic stuff from the a bit of the Welsh poetry stuff with the triads. So I thought I'd share a Welsh triad with you, and then after that, I'll give you just a bit of the gnomic poetry that is obviously a big influence in here as well. But to start with the Welsh triad, so this is a real thing. The Cyngail triads that he has in here, as which he did such a wonderful job of incorporating that into a particular scene, which I'm sure we'll talk about early on. But as a form of entertainment, a form of bonding, a friendly competition of a sort during a feast or what have you. But this is a real thing, actually. These triads, known as the triads of the island of Britain in the Welsh sources, or the Trioedd Ynys Prydain, is how you would say that in Welsh. And we have examples in several medieval Welsh manuscripts, some going back as early as the 13th century, though we think these triads are probably much older than that, going back to like the 9th century at least, or something like that. But a lot of them appear in the White Book of Rhydderch, and then there are quite a few in the Red Book of Hergest as well. So there's, if you ever want to read any of these, there was a really helpful website out there, a guy named Sean Eckard, who is at the Department of English and Literatures at the University of British Columbia. So there you go, fellow Canadian there, Erin. That's a really nice website. And if you really want to get into it, the authoritative edition is by Rachel Bromwich. So it's just called the Trioedd Ynys Prydain, or the Welsh Triads. But enough of the background. I'll just read. Most of the triads that we have in these manuscripts are actually mythological, refer to stuff that you would read about, like in the Mabinogion, for example. Characters there. Some of them Arthurian, some of them even going back more deep in time with the mythological stuff. So I'll just read one. And I do want to give a caveat here that when I learned Welsh, it was modern Welsh. And I'm reading from a medieval Welsh manuscript. The language has changed. So if anybody out there is actually a medieval Welsh expert, forgive me if I mispronounce anything. But I'll do my best here. So yeah, you're a medieval Welsh expert now, Evan. So, all right, I'll just read a quick one for you guys so you can hear the mythological. There's an Arthurian reference in this particular triad. I'll read it in the medieval Welsh first, and then I'll read the translation by Sean Eckard. Tair gwydd balfawd Ynys Prydain. Un onydint a trewis matholwch wyddel ar branwyn ferch lir. Ar ail a drewis gwen chwifarch ar wen chwifar. Ac o a chaws hynny bu waith Cadgamlen wedi hynny. Ar drydyd ar drewis golydan vard ar gadwaladir vendigait. So, there's the translation of that. 3 harmful blows of the island of Britain. The first of them, Matholwch, the Irishman, struck upon Branwen, daughter of Llyr. The second, Gwenhwyfach, struck upon Gwenhwyfar. That's Guinevere, the Arthurian fame. And for that reason, the Battle of Camlan happened afterwards. And the third, Goladan the poet, struck upon Cadwaladr the Blessed. So there you go. That's a good example of these triads that you'd find in these Welsh manuscripts. That Guy Gavriel K obviously was inspired to include in The Last Light of the Sun. So we'll talk about that scene though later. So the second, unless you guys have anything to say about that, I'll go on to my second little poetic bit, which is there's a certain part, this is not really spoilery for me to read this from the Last Light of the Sun, where the character Thorkel says to the character Bern, he gives him a bit of gnomic, there's a moment of wisdom he gives him during a particular part when they meet each other. And it says, he says, you know the saga, have thine eyes about you in hall or darkness. Be wary ever, be watching always. Okay, so that's the what Thorkel says to Bern. It's not actually from a saga. There's plenty of saga influence in here. With like Evan of the Jorms Vikings. The Joms Vikingar saga is an actual saga, and they were the Joms Vikings who lived in a place called Jomsborg. Actually, are referred to in many sagas, and they have their own saga as well. But this particular bit of gnomic wisdom is actually from the Havamal, which I'll read first in Old Norse, and then I'll read the translation by Hollander, which actually Guy Gavriel Kay cites as an important source material for him. I think he read Hollander's translations of some things, definitely of the Poetic Edda. You'll see how close it is. But just the opening stanza of the Havamal, which is this, it's basically a gnomic poem. It's the speaker is ostensibly Odin, who has hung himself upon the world tree and sacrificed himself to himself, stuck with a spear and all that in order to gain wisdom. And he basically is spouting all this wisdom to us. And the opening stanza is Gottir alar, other gangi fram, skoldask skilli, skugnask skuli, því at ovist erat vita, hvar og vinner sitja a fletti furur. Okay, so I'm going to read Hollander's translation, which I'm very confident that Guy Gavriel Kay used, because you're going to hear how close it is to what Thorkel says to Bern. Have thy eyes about thee when thou enterest. Be wary always. Be watchful always. For one never knoweth when need will be to meet hidden foe in the hall. Right? So it's pretty close to what GGK was the advice that Thorkel was giving to Bern in there. So you can see some of the influence there. And the Edda is, of course, some of the most important source material we have for Norse mythology and so many other things. And it goes way back in the centuries. Yeah. So are you guys ready to start with our spoilers or any
Unbelievably cool, by the way, that you can speak that
Yes.
Welsh. Thank you for doing that, Philip. And it was beautiful.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I had fun. I hope I didn't bore anybody watching this with all that.
No, more of this. I love it. I love it.
No,
Thank you.
Alan's not watching this.
Alan stopped watching the video about 5 minutes ago. So, so anyway, so yeah, that's I think it. Unless anyone has anything to add for the non-spoiler portion of our discussion. Okay, let's dive into the spoiler. It's the time for the robots.
Spoiler bot.
Mhm.
Trademark
Okay.
GGGKR.
There we go.
Hey!
All right, there we go. Erin did a little there. All right. All right. So I thought we could start with the Kungail, which is an interesting
Oh,
the way he put it's basically they're Welsh. There's some of the words he uses are actually more Irish here and there, but mostly they're very Welsh inspired. Yeah, let's if you guys are okay with that. Or did we start actually in there with actually we started with the Norse stuff, didn't we?
we started with the yeah.
Okay, let's start with
The
them
book.
then. With the opening, a horse he came to understand was missing, right? Which I thought was a great opening line. So we'll start with the Erlings, who are really the Norse in here, with poor Bern and his situation on Rabadi, which is, I felt, a very clear echo of the island of Gotland off the coast of Sweden, which was a major trading post where we have all kinds of really cool archaeological there are coins from the Middle East and Byzantium and all over the place I mean it's a archaeological treasure, really, this island. Yeah, he calls it Robadi, and we meet poor Bern in the midst of a very undesirable moment in his life, where he's stolen a horse, who turns out to be a pretty darn good horse, right? So any thoughts on this opening from any of you? I've been talking a bit. So anyone want to talk about this opening with the outsider, actually, Ibn Bakir? His perspective is what we get to begin with, which I thought was actually a really good touch on GGK's part, giving us that perspective to begin with, even though he's not a major character in here. But he does allow us to he's from Al Rasan, which I thought was
I wanted him to be. I wanted him to be a major character.
Yeah.
yeah.
I like seeing that sideways glance at a culture.
Well, and I
Yeah.
think he also served the role of giving us a contrast of what we're dealing with in this setting in this book versus like the Lions of Alrasan. And then we later get some of that perspective from the Sarantine Mosaic. So I like that he served that role. I think, if I'm not mistaken, this is the first GGK book I've come across that doesn't have a prologue. I don't
Hmm.
know
Yeah.
for what it's worth.
Yeah, I noticed that too. I said,
At
where's
least
the
since
prologue?
Tigana, yeah.
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 No, Chicana had a prologue.
No, I
Tigana,
mean since Tigana, I don't know if the Fiona of our tapestry have
did they
prologues? I
have
forget.
prologues? Yeah,
I don't
maybe.
know.
I'm not
I
sure.
don't remember.
Yeah.
Although I will say, even if there's not a prologue, but one of the things I'd noted, because I sort of re-listened to this again in preparation for this, and I did really notice how, even though it's not a prologue, this opening section sets up the theme so well in miniature, right? Like there's so many references to things that are going to become incredibly important, including like translation. Like I loved with the that first point of view where we're getting that issue of like spoken translation, right? Because he doesn't understand, he has his translator, the translator actually sort of exists because of spending time in these other places. And then that's mirrored by like one of Eldred's big projects, which is translating all of these books into like the Anglican, I think he's translating them like into their language anyway,
Yeah.
right? And so it's such a small thing, but I love how even in the start we have these small bits and they're going to expand out like throughout.
And isn't
So
he
even though
actually
it's not a
buying?
prologue, it has the function, right?
Isn't he actually buying those manuscripts from Ibn Fakir as well?
At
Yeah.
least one of them, yeah.
He's the one who turns up later and he's robbed of his horse by the
Yeah.
creepy
And
dude.
and one of the manuscripts we have to mention is from our boy Rustem from
Yes.
Lord of Embers, who wrote a
Yeah.
treatise on eyes. Come
Cataract
on.
thing.
I was
Yeah.
like, yes, that's my man.
Yeah. That was fun. The little
Yeah.
Easter eggs. That's one of the advantages of reading these in publication order.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or just reading all his books. I mean, like
Yeah.
you get so many connections. I mean, there's a lot
Yeah.
more from the Sarantine mosaic in here. Um, but yeah.
The
Uh
Jadverse. Is that what they call it? The
the
Jadverse?
Jadverse. The
Nice.
JCU. I did like this first section, because what I was thinking the book was going to be was, and it is this to some extent, was more of a story told around a campfire type book. And I think that's somewhat what he's trying to evoke. And so we have the opening section with the merchant, and then we go into the burn section where it's en media res. I mean, he's already stolen the horse. He's on the run. We get, really well told backstory about, but just enough of Thorkel and how he killed a guy, and you're wondering who this dad is. So he's setting up the dad. And then this hapless Burn, finds himself in this, in this coven of women sorceresses, in which the line "I must have your seed" is uttered very, very soon. But what I liked about this, because as we talked about in the Sarantine Mosaic, one of our criticisms was that all the women are throwing themselves at Crispin in a very unrealistic way that makes you do what Johanna did just then, which is roll your eyes and shake your head. And that's how
That's what
I
I was
felt.
doing throughout the whole entire duology.
And when we had "I must have your seed" burn, I thought, oh my God, we're doing this again. We're doing this again. Every woman burn meets. But what I
Nope.
did like is that from the Volor, the woman who heads all this, it was just a ploy. She was not actually, first of all, she's not going to do what he said that he was going to do. Although the story that she sold him, I thought would have been a really cool story. He goes back and hides in the boat of the merchant. I was like, oh, this is a buddy comedy now. This is the merchant and it's Burn, and they're gonna go sail the world. I was like, this is the story, and that story started building in my mind, and which is a big
No.
no-no. But I did like that. I did like that reversal there. And I did like the meeting of Anrid, who gets bitten by the snake, and um,
Mm.
uh, he makes this crazy decision to swim with the horse I didn't even know horses could swim like that. So I was pretty invested at this point in the story. I have to say.
Cool. Joanna, any thoughts on this portion? I thought that Anrid was a great character from that meeting, and Guy Gavriel Kay writes clever characters really well. And he's great at showing you that even characters who may not be conventionally seen as intelligent have a certain kind of cleverness. Like even Bern is not entirely like he does fall for the yeah, you go back now, you're invisible.
Oh my gosh.
You know it's gonna go. Yord's can you imagine Yord and the other like old what does he call them in here? Not vulva.
Just they see him tiptoeing
Volar?
Right? And they're all like,
through
he
the
thinks he's invisible, you know. Knowing full well he's going to be brutally killed when they catch him. But Anrid saves him from that fate, thank goodness, because she was bitten by a snake. If she hadn't been bitten by the snake, would she have done it? You know, the sort of chain of events here.
Oh, I
She,
love it. I love it. So there we go. Heroic character here. I think Baron gets saved by a few female characters in this story.
oh yeah,
But one thing that was interesting about that to me is how, is it Anred, if I'm saying her name right, the way that she was able to turn things against the Volur, if I'm saying the name right, of that basically that woman who did that to Byrne, by telling the authority that, oh, well, she put a magic spell on him, and clearly she's trying to go against you here, and it turns the tides against her. So it turns into a vengeance plot for her.
in a
So
brutal death for those like that
oh
was some of the
gosh,
hardest
Yeah.
yeah, stoning.
violence that
yikes,
we've seen in a K book.
Which you, by the
that
way,
was
aren't
brutal.
there aren't references to stoning in Old Norse
Hmm.
culture so much. I can't think of any off the top of my head anyway. That's more of a biblical thing, really. But
Yeah.
anyway, yeah, it was brutal. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I thought that whole section was funny. And I mean, the fact that he believed it for a minute that he was going to be invisible and be able to just walk through. But yeah, it was a horrible thing to do to him too. So yeah, glad it worked out for him. I thought that was pretty entertaining. Yeah.
Well, if we can we stay with him for a second? Because I don't know where the
Yeah.
story goes directly after this, but I did also really like the section with the Vikings, the town that surrounds the Vikings, where
Yeah.
he meets the other woman.
Mhm.
I forget her name.
Thera?
Tina?
Um,
It's
Thera.
Thera. Thera. Yeah,
Kira.
yeah.
Thera's her name.
Yeah.
Uh, I liked the ambiance of this town. I like this ritual of going up to like, Philip. Is that I don't know if you know how.
100%. That is
Oh,
exactly how
okay.
you join the Vikings.
Yeah.
Right?
And I really liked all that stuff, you know, that because I wanted more Burn. So anytime we got with him, I was excited. But I forget if there was a period, if there was part of the story between that and the part in the beginning in
I
this.
think we get a
Do we
lot of
go to
like
the King?
the
Do we go to the King
condyle.
Gill stuff?
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 Yeah, we
But
do.
I agree, though, that that's a great portion of his journey where he's encountering the initial the guy who comes out to challenge him, who they initially try to get him drunk, so he'll fail the next day.
Yeah.
And I love what he does here because there's an aspect to this which is really cool. Like, so there's the legend of the Vikings, which is exactly like the Vikings. This is exactly how you join. You have to challenge one of them, and if you die, you're not going to join. And if you kill the other guy, you get to be one. That's exactly how it is in the sagas. But that's the legend. The reality is they're going to try to get you drunk. They're going to try to
Yeah.
cut you. They're going to do everything they can to make it unfair. You know, it's not this honorable thing. It's like, no, and of course, then they go out on the streets trying to catch him because he got away. He realized he was clever enough to realize, oh, wait, they're not just being friendly here.
Oh
They
my gosh.
want to get me. So I'm in bad shape for tomorrow morning. And then the one guy comes after him, Gerd, I think, right?
Third.
What's his name?
Yeah.
Yeah, who eventually he outwits because he is his father's son in many ways. He's not just a brute. He has some, he's able to think a bit there.
And
I
and
mean,
then by this time, I guess we have met Thorkel, so we
yeah,
know a little bit about him.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
yes,
Because
Yeah.
if we
yes,
do
we
the
have.
first Kingale section with the raid on,
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. When
yeah,
they
we have.
initially show up, let's go there then.
Yeah. Well,
Where?
actually, no, can I stay there for
Oh,
just a
please,
second,
please.
Philip?
Yeah,
Because
go
that
ahead,
was
Erin.
something I really wanted to talk about,
Go for it.
was actually Thera.
Yep.
But before that, just one last thought on Enred was just I love the revenge plot and all of that, but I also like she introduces the element of the importance of kinship for
Yes.
this entire tale. And it's
Yes.
interesting that Byrne sort of denies it. He's like, "Oh, we're not kin because, you're the sister of the my sister's like husband or whatever, right?" And so he sort of pushes back against it, but she's like, "You are the only community I have," right? So part of it's revenge, part of it's definitely the snake bite, but the other part is her sense that he and his mother are part of her sort of kin community. And I think that becomes like something that follows through really well. But Thera, this is a character I loved. So like the sex worker in Germswick, and the reason I loved her is because she is basically a businesswoman, like
Yeah.
unapologetically a businesswoman,
Mm.
and and really sort of schools Burn multiple times when he doesn't understand her that way, right? So initially, it's like when he doesn't understand why she's so upset because Gerd has sort of taken back half of his fee, and she doesn't understand it's not about, the amount of money she has. It's about she worked, she deserves her fee, and that's not right, right? That he doesn't. So it's like, this is a job. Why is it treated any other way? But then I also loved at the end when Byrne comes back and he's like,
Yes.
I'll give you a
Yes.
bunch of money so you can go home. And she's like, you white knight fool,
I'm buying
basically.
the business.
Yeah,
Yep.
I don't want to go home. I left for a reason. I'm buying a business and I loved that. Like that was
Yeah.
just, I know we didn't get this was one of those cases where I'm like, yeah, we got enough of her, although I want her to have her own story. I don't want to read that book. But like, I thought that was just really well done and not something we see often. Like, just a really interesting, good sex worker character in this like Viking setting.
Yeah.
I
Beautifully
agree
said.
with that. Yeah, I agree with that, especially because I feel like anytime we get references to sex workers in other books, I don't feel like we get that fleshed out of a character. Usually they're just like, oh, the guy did this with this woman or whatever. But I did appreciate that we got much more to her. Like we understood where she was coming from and her internal motivation. And I also, even though it seemed like I mean, she saves Byrne, and I think Byrne wants to save her, or at the very least, he's understandably upset and angry when when she's basically raped, and at the same time, and her thing is, I'm not getting paid. How dare I not get
Yeah.
paid, right? But I think that that anger in him about her being treated that way by Gerd, also to me, it in some ways fueled what happened during the duel too. So I
Mhm.
don't know. I mean, that's one way to look at it. But yeah, appreciate the attention to her.
Yeah, brilliantly said, both of you. Thank you. All right. Shall we join the Congeil for their triads and whatnot?
Mm.
Which I love the way it was set up, where uh, Alan and Di think they're going, and their cousin Griffith, they think they're going to do a cattle raid. They're bored young people, and of course that goes south really fast because they're trying to raid. They don't even know where they are, right? And it turns out they're raiding the farm of this legend, Bryn ap Hwyl, who's got quite a few of his
Plaudits.
men with him. Yeah, and
But
plaudits.
but
Legend.
did those brothers, so they knew they were still on Kingel lands, right? They knew they were raiding other
Right.
Kingels.
The rival kingdom,
Yeah,
or
because that's the thing
princedom.
is that it's not just the three kingdoms of the Kingel, the Anglican, and the Erlings.
Right.
Like there's also rivalries within
Yeah.
each culture,
They're
and
from
Mm.
Kadir and they're
yeah,
raiding a farm in Arberth,
yeah,
which is exactly how it was in medieval Wales. They were rival, princedoms or kingdoms that were constantly at each other, as much as they were after the Anglo-Saxons. And then, of course, the Vikings came along as well and all that. And the Irish were in there as well. So, but yeah, they were always raiding each other. There was and that
yeah,
was something that many Welsh historians of the time, you can go all the way back to Gildas, lamenting the fact of this disunity among the Britons, which is why the Anglo-Saxons were able to defeat them ultimately. So that's the thing for sure. But I love how Kynian comes along
yeah,
right behind them, and
yeah.
it's a
I
wonderful
love that.
introduction to his character as well, which eventually leads to them. being welcomed by Bryn, who knows very well why they were there, despite Kynian making up this, oh, they're my guards. They came along with me, right? But that scene in the hall was is it just peak Guy Gavriel K stuff for me, where you have this wonderful tension going on, and the beauty of the Welsh triads being brought into this, the spirit of the whole thing, despite them being from these rival princedoms, that this brings them together. This moment, I just thought that was beautifully done. I love that whole segment here with Rhiannon's introduction. Um, Contributing to the triads as she makes her grand entrance very deliberately, as is pointed out later by Alan, that you were trying to do that. You were trying to get every guy in there to turn your way, and and you succeeded. Yeah, I thought that was a really powerful scene overall. So, any thoughts on the introduction of the Kungail portion from any of you guys?
I really liked the section. I think it was a great introduction. I love what you were saying, Philip. It just adds so much. Like this is already adding so much to my appreciation of it.
Yeah.
Hearing this. Uh, yeah, I'm really curious what you all thought about Rhiannon because when we're introduced to her, I thought she was going to play this massive role in the story, and I know that there
Me
is
too.
a Celtic a mythological figure of Rhiannon, right? And so I expected her to be. I was impressed in some ways that she wasn't romanticized in the way that I would have expected for this character, but there were some things that happen obviously that go wrong and she seems to be torn in the middle of it. But I would be curious to hear any thoughts about her in particular from any three of you. Maybe
Yeah,
Erin,
Aaron,
go
do you
ahead.
have
Tell
thoughts
us. What
on
do you think about
Rhiannon?
Rhiannon?
Yeah.
Um, this was one of the disappointments for me because I also, when we first like are introduced to her, and I love the name Rhiannon. It's actually one of my favorite names. So like
Yeah.
I'm just so primed to be like one of Kay's strong women. This is going to be so great. She's clearly a central figure. Like Bryn's already talking about like, unifying at least two of those like Kingale kingdoms by marrying her potentially to like die
Mm,
or to Alan or whatnot, probably to die. But anyway, of course, that goes horribly. That gets taken off
yeah.
the table like right away. But so yeah, I was expecting a lot, and I was sort of she's a very strong character, so I did like that. Like she's very strong-willed. She's very I like even the way she expresses her hurt towards Alan when he attacks her, sort of
Mhm.
afterwards, and like claiming that she did that, and she comes very back with, well, you have swords and whatever, I have my weapons. And so the way she sort of pushes back when there's a lot of hurt being thrown around, but she just it did feel like she was sort of a pawn that went nowhere, like in terms of like the entire
Yeah.
novel. And I
There's a whole middle
know,
section where she's not even in it.
yeah. And even at the end, it's left up in the air whether she would be useful in marrying Ethelbert or whether that's not going to happen because of Kendra and Alan, right? So there's even that importance is taken from her sort of at the end in terms of being something to unify the two kingdoms, which is of course an important role for well-born women at that time. And so yeah, I did find it a bit disappointing in that respect. And I think there's a way he tries to justify it, which is also something I didn't like. Maybe we'll talk about it later, but because there's a theme running through this where there's a very sense, and it's narrator where like not everything matters, right?
Mm.
Like you
Yeah.
have that at the end, like
What a
these actions
convenient little
that
piece
don't
of
matter.
information that is. As a novelist, yeah,
Yeah,
not everything
right.
matters. I just wanted to throw this in.
And I
Yeah.
felt like that happened to her, which made me
Yeah.
sad.
Well, so this is a an issue with not only Kay's oeuvre, but with the larger medieval based or historical based fantasy genre in general. It's like, and it becomes kind of tiring. And I'm sure you guys as readers know this so well, is that, well, if Kay's going to do historical fantasy set in all these milieus where the menu of choices for a woman are severely limited, um, there's only so many things you can do. There's only so many times you can either flip the script in a way that is meant to be kind of like a reversal of a trope, of a damsel in distress trope, kind of like how, when Rihanna is captured instead of being the traditional damsel in distress, she's like, no, let him kill me. She's strong in that moment. Or you have a lamenting of the limitations of a female's role from maybe within a female subjectivity, like happens in this book where I think one of the women think that yeah, women were only good for marrying off, and that's my role, whereas my brothers can go off and be these heroic characters. When you read a lot of fantasy, these kind of repetitions get tiring, and I don't know that there's a great solution for it if this is where you're basing your milieu. I think Kay has tried in the past. We talked about in Song for Arban. He I think tried to sort of show the complexity of this situation a little more with a number of female characters. I think the strong female characters in Lines of Al Rassan are good examples of how to do it right. But yeah, I mean, I can't help but think that when I read the female characters in this book, it's like, okay, it's these same sort of moves you can make. You can only make these certain limited amount of moves, and I regretted that at times.
I do wonder what you guys think about Enid, Rhiannon's mother, because to me, even though she has, if anything, less page time than Rhiannon, she actually comes off as a stronger character in many ways. And I feel like Rhiannon is in the process of becoming more and more like her mother, perhaps, based on what I've seen. And in terms of Enid's understanding with her husband, with Bryn, and also her relationship with Kynian and other matters, her saving of Thorkel, which turns out to be pivotal in the moment, but also later on, there are repercussions from that decision that essentially give us the ending of the story. That moment could never have happened without Enid intervening in the moment and saying, no, I claim this guy. You're not executing him. This is my decision. And so I want to hear your thoughts on her, if you don't mind.
What was the relationship between Enid and Kenyan
I
and
think it was they both love each other romantically, but I don't think they've actually had a physical relationship.
Don't think so.
It's
because
more
I
of a
thought that because I was confused
it's
because
a
there's
more of
a
an affair, a psychological affair, I guess you could
okay,
call it.
yeah,
But
because
Bryn is
Kenyan
very
and
clearly having all these little servant women in his visiting in the outhouse or whatever. So yeah,
Mhm.
but I don't think there's been any like physical consummation of the relationship, as it were. Uh, so that's my
Mhm.
my
That
take.
was,
Erin,
yeah, that was my sense of it. That was my sense of it as well. Just the idea that they deeply love each other. There's a sort of emotional and like psychological like bond between them. And she definitely likes to tease him physically, but
yeah.
it's it's kept like chaste. Other than like kissing,
because
basically, it
there's a
seems
scene
to be.
between Kenyan and Bryn or that guy where it felt like they were having a slumber party almost. They were because did Kenyan take his bed? Was that part of it? Maybe
Might
I'm
have,
misremembering this.
well,
'Cause I'm
that would
having
have been just
The
being
problem
a
Joanna mentioned, which is that I don't remember all.
I know, this is
might have
tricky.
been just
But
them being a good host, when you
but
have.
then after
Yeah.
that, I thought Enid came to see Kenyan.
Yep.
She did.
She
Yeah,
did.
yeah, yeah,
Yep.
yeah. Okay, so I'm
Yeah.
remembering
Because
that.
yeah, that scene is you're remembering it right. First, he has this sort of tete-a-tete with Bryn, and then Bryn leaves to meet his serving woman partner for the night, and then Enid comes and I do appreciate, and I'm sort of revising a little bit. I think what Joanna said in terms of the non-spoilers, as we're getting to spoilers, is correct in terms of like, yes, the women are sort of on the periphery, but they are so important
Mm.
narratively, and that matters. Right. And so like as you say, the choice to save Thorkel to make him her servant, that matters for this. Like the choice of Thera to save Byrne, that matters. So uh, in a way, I feel like Kay actually is succeeding in showing that despite those limited options that like Evan just talked about, women in this world mattered, even though they were very limited in sort of what they could be or do.
Yeah.
right? I don't know. I'm
Yeah.
starting to get my
Yeah.
mind changed a little
They're
bit.
they're they're
I
able to ameliorate the slaughter that the men are constantly perpetrating. Some of their decisions matter in that sense. Yeah.
Well, and I just, going back to what you were saying, Philip, I mean, she does play a pivotal role in Thorkel joining their company.
Yeah.
Whereas if it were up to Bryn, I don't think that would have been the case. Like if she hadn't had some influence, like she has a lot of influence over Bryn, not only in that section, but like I think you also alluded to, I'm just going to jump, if it's okay, to the very end,
Sure.
because at the very end of the book, I think we get more and more conversation. I feel like we're just building and building on this whole conversation at the end about women feeling like they have this helpless role. And we do, like I said, see some heroism here. Like there's that one tale of the woman who is what is it? Like she is her sister has been blood
Yeah.
eagled and she hears the people coming and she warns her townspeople. So there's that heroic role. But then when we get back uh to them, they like to Rhiannon, she is lamenting about her, she feels rage. She actually lament is the wrong word. She's angry
Yeah.
because she feels so helpless as a woman. And I don't know if it's she and her mother, they question whether their presence there is making things worse because they make themselves more vulnerable or whatever. And and then and Enid is questioning whether she is doing any good at all. And Rhiannon tells her that Bryn wouldn't have listened to anyone else when she insisted that he not duel because she's the one who comes forward. She's like, "Look, you're fat, you're old, you have this limp, you can't do this." And she was like, and Rhiannon says, like, if you hadn't, you're the only one who could tell him that. Like, you're the only one. No one else could tell him that. And of course, there's that pride thing. So, yeah, he listens to his wife. And obviously it goes in a weird direction that we can wait to get to, but there's a lot there. There's a lot there about her influence. I think that's stated over and over again. But I do feel like Kate is trying to bring attention to the fact that women have this struggle, that there is this internal struggle, largely through Rhiannon, I would say.
Yeah. And we can't leave this portion without talking about the raid by the Ragnarsson brothers, Mikkel, who dies in the raid, who's killed by Bryn after Alan throws his sword at him, and but also
Hmm.
the villain who I expected to be a larger
Yes.
role in here, Ivar, who just suddenly bites it. And it was, I was oddly very
It
satisfying.
was. It was a good moment.
It was
Even
a
though I wanted
great,
more, I liked his POV because it was so alive
yeah.
with hatred.
Yeah.
But the quick cutting off of his life was
Brand
great.
Leosin just says, "Yep, chunk." Of course, I think that Bern was about to kill him as well. But the raid that results in the death of Dai, was
Yeah.
Alan's older brother, and the beginning of the whole fairy portion of this,
Hmm.
when the fairy comes and takes his soul to give it to the queen of the fairies, and that leads to Alan eventually having his own relationship with this fairy. So that you guys wanted to talk fairy, let's talk about the fairies
Let's
and your
talk about the
thoughts.
fairies.
Because I love this portion of it actually. This was some of the most magical that Kay has gotten
Yeah.
since the Fiona of
Yeah.
Arc tapestry, I would say. And I was here for it. I absolutely love these parts. So I'm gonna let you guys talk about it though.
Well,
Aaron, Evan, go ahead.
this specific portion
Yeah.
is great. When he goes out and is walking into the lake and all of a sudden becomes frozen and sees this imagery of the fairy queen with Di. And that to me was a more effective scene than the boar scene from the Sailing to Sarantium, where it's kind of a similar one where they walk up into this sort of magical moment. That scene was more
You
effective.
mean the Zubir?
The Zubir, yeah, the Zubir. That scene, like that scene didn't communicate to me the same kind of magic as this fairy scene did. Maybe just because I like the Fae more as a type of character, and I really, really like as often with Kay, I like the idea here, the idea of these kind of native magics being on the wane, and as as Jad moves into this part of the world, and this is why Kenyan's character is so interesting. Absolutely need to talk about him.
Mm.
These things are retreating, just as the forests are retreating and the magic is retreating. Um, I really love that idea. The relationship between the fairy girl and Alan, I wasn't so much kind of taken with. But I really love this first time we see them. I thought it was a truly magical moment. And I love the big idea that he's exploring here.
Cool.
Yeah, what I'll
Yeah.
add to that is that it's on a moonless night that this magic comes forward. And that's very significant as, of course, is represented by the sun, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that right away we get that conflict between the pagan fairy magic and that of Christianity and Jadeite religion. And
Yeah.
How dare you?
and it's interesting, I mean, because you mentioned, is it Kenyan? Is it Kenyan or Kenyan sun?
Kainian, actually. If you're pronouncing it the
Okay,
Welsh way, it would be Kainian.
Kainian. Okay, so with Kainian, he, there are passages in the book, if I recall correctly, where he's even upset about the fact that the Jadeite religion is starting to move towards celibacy for its
Yes.
spiritual leaders, and so we're not only seeing the rise of Christianity and but also the shift in it, like the dominance of it, and it seems to be also associated. I don't know, for lack of a better word, civilization, because there's removal of the forest, and the forest is where the fae is. And I just think that's really interesting. And again, speaking of the Moonless Night, because something I've appreciated in all the K books so far is the attention to what the moon or sun are doing. I think there's always something, some description of that. And it always feels like there's a significant moment happening whenever we get the sun or moon lighting in a certain way. Maybe it's a motif. I don't know.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah.
Erin.
I mean, yeah, and that's just to pick up on that. It's something very much in Kate that I also love. Like the skies matter, and he pays attention to the skies. And I could think of like Dana's Red Moon from Fiona of Ar, and you like think of like the stars, the sun, and the way the religions are organized in El Rasan. So yeah, I loved that as well. And in terms of the fairy, a couple of things. Like I do to sort of build on what's been said so far, that waning power, I like how specific he made it. Like I like the details. Like they used to have wings,
Mm.
right? They used to be able to fly, and they no longer have wings, right? So we're seeing like that it's a very physical process that's actually happening to the bodies of the fairies, which I really liked. And it's very much based in the land. Like this is a part that I liked about this is that the knowledge is at least when we're talking about the Earlings and we're talking about the Kingale and not sort of the Jad stuff, is about that connection to land, whether it's like forests or seas or these sorts of things, right? And so it's when they start to like literally cut down those trees, because you have that at the end, they're cutting down the forests. That's really sort of speeding that process um, of losing that knowledge. And what I understand your perhaps hesitance with the relationship between the fairy and Alan. I mean, I don't love that it had to be like this sort of sexual relationship. I'm like, why it didn't, whatever, fine, it's Kay. It's a sort of thing that he does. But what I did like about their relationship, and I thought was really important, was that it allowed, especially with her POVs and the fact that we don't get a name for her,
Yeah.
right? He was very good at like giving us them as alien. And I think that's so important for fairy is alien. And there was actually one, if you guys don't mind, one quick spot I noticed when I was thinking about this that sort of even just speaks to that. It's on page 231 in the book, but it's a conversation between them, and he's asking, like, she followed Alan on their journey sort of thing, and he asks her why. And she says, they think in this way. It has to do with time, one thing, then another thing, and then a next, the way the world takes shape for them. Right. So even this question of like causation of whys is something that she just does not understand. It's not the way she understands the world and organizes. And so like, and there's a bunch of little moments like that when we have her POV that I just thought were really well done to give us like an alienness of thought as well as like the other aspects like of changing hair and physical aspects and just that enchanted space element. It was just another layer that I really loved.
And first person narration, or not present tense narration, right?
when she's
switch that.
on the POV. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I love this part so much, and like you said, Erin, the otherness of the fairy, which allows Kay to explore some of his themes in a new way as well, because you do have the otherness of, you have the Norse-based culture, you have the old English-based culture, and you have the Welsh-based culture, and there's obviously othering going on there, but these are the ultimate other, right? They're the ones who are being pushed aside by human expansion and iron, right? And I love the
Yes.
moments where the humans who know what they're doing put the iron down in order to go and talk to like Alan does a couple times and that sort of thing. But the portion of the story, which I'm jumping ahead here a little bit, but that's okay, I think, where it really comes to the fore is when we have a triad of characters. We're going back to the triad here, right? You have Thorkel and Alan and Ethelbert, and they each represent these three different cultures that are the basis of this story. And at the same time, they're in this place where they are now the other, right? Where they are the invader, they're the foreign, and they feel very much under threat. And they meet something very Zubir-like in there. We don't know what it is. It doesn't get a form really. It's there and it's growling and it's big. And they have to appease it through the old ways where Thorkel gives a sacrifice. He puts his hammer there, right? And we learned that that hammer was much later discovered after they cut down all the forest and all that. But I love that part of their adventure through there in order to warn Bryn and the farm about the Yorms Vikings who are on their way to achieve glory and vengeance and all that, right?
After they kill Ivar,
Yeah,
they're still like,
Yeah.
we're gonna go anyway.
they're
We're
gonna go. I
gonna.
love that he does that. That completely threw me. And I was like,
Yeah.
yes, that is so cool. Yeah. But yeah, that part of the whole thing really is. I enjoyed that part of the narrative a lot because you do get this sort of ultimate othering through that, and these moments of connection and understanding, despite this, and Alan and the fairy, I think, are a good example of that, and even Kynian in the yes, he feels it was a moment of weakness and despair when he was trying to save his wife, and he goes to the fairy to say, can you please save her?" Right? So there are these brief moments of connection despite the otherness of these fairy and their presence there and the threat of them, but they turn out to be as well when they're able to achieve with the sword that the silver sword the freeing of the spirits of the men who've been
Yeah.
ensnared by the fairy queen. At the end, there is a sense of release. There is a sense of connection and compassion in all of that too. I think that I love that stuff. That it goes back to a more
Yeah.
mythological feel here, which I'm definitely a fan of. So
There was also a conversation that the fairy had with Alan about how fairy and humans were not quite so different in the past at one point,
yes,
and also how she doesn't understand the concept of sorrow. She's like, sorrow, sorrow, sorrow. Why are you all so fixated on this thing called sorrow? And I feel like there's almost a conversation there about, is sorrow a gift? Can sorrow be seen as a gift? So yeah, I really love those sections. And that was excellent. Yeah.
Can I jump in too as
Yeah.
well? And hate,
please.
right? Because she also doesn't understand hate and like rage. Like she doesn't
Mm,
understand these human emotions, which is great. But I'm wondering if anyone else thinking about that moment where he puts his hammer down, like Thorkel, and like makes that bargain, if you will, with the creature in the woods. I'm wondering, did anyone read that also as like symbolic of his ultimate sacrificing? Like, because there's the sense that it was ultimately his plan, if things came to it, to sacrifice his life for his son,
Yes.
right? And that was like always sort of a potential plan. Like he hoped to avert it, but that was the potential reason this is happening. And so is there also a way where there's almost like a life sacrificed? It's not just the weapon when he like puts it down.
Yes.
Like I
Yeah.
felt like there were multiple layers going on there, which were really, I think, just beautiful.
When he leaves that thing unsaid, right? In the beginning, he says, "Yeah, you're here for your brother, you're here for your father, and I'm here for, well, we'll just leave it there." And that's really well said, Erin. And I think that it's not just the hammer, it's his intention to give his life,
Yeah.
which he
Yeah.
ultimately does when he has the duel with the leader of the Jorms Vikings. I forget his name. Brand Leifson,
Yeah.
and he knows anybody who knows what they're doing. Bryn observes it. They all see, oh, he's missing the eye. Every time he's doing the backhand swing, he gives it away, and he deliberately gives himself in that moment so that they can go away, saving a bit of face and not having to have a battle. And he's saving his son's life in that moment. So yeah.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, can I just say that um yeah, I wanted to be there with you guys in terms of
Mm.
feeling the strangeness of the fairy character, but I didn't feel that he went far enough with the strangeness. Because I think the thing that got me in that first scene was that genuine sense of what is happening here. It's almost unexplainable what Alan is seeing when he sees this carriage coming across the water with the fairy queen. And then we have this fairy who is like, yes, she doesn't understand time or sorrow or hate, but she's able to express those things. And I, in a way that is supremely understandable for regular people. And when I'm seeing some kind of extreme other or alien figure in a book, I want to feel the strangest, feel that there's something there that I can't quite understand or can't quite reach. If anybody reads a lot of weird fiction, the writers who are so great at this, writers like China Miéville
Solaris by
or
Stanislaw
M.
Lem comes to
Yeah,
mind.
yeah,
Yeah.
or M. John
Yes.
Harrison, who's my one of my favorite authors.
Mhm.
They have a way of making you feel that there's a disconnect there that can never be crossed.
mm,
And I felt that that this fairy character was just a little too brought home, too easy to understand, and the dialogue to me was a little too simplistic. But I do want to, but I appreciate that that's what he was going for. But I do want to talk about Kenyan before we move off the Kingale, because I think it ties into this, and his reluctance of how like he has had an experience in the past. He's lost loved ones, his wife, I think, his original wife, and he is this priest of Jad who turned to or was turned to by the pagan powers in his moment of grief. And you can see the way he's struggling with that difference. It's something that Eldred, when we get introduced to him, it's something that they talk about together. And there's a beautiful quote where he describes how Jad is going to take over, where he says, "I believe that what doctrine tells us is becoming truth,
uh-huh.
that by
Yes.
teaching it, we can help it become the nature of Jad's world. If there are spirits, power, a half world beside ours, it is coming to an end. What we teach will be true, partly because we teach it." And I thought was really interesting, meaty stuff, because it's not saying that like he's not saying that Jad and the Christian Jad world is the truth of the world. He's saying that like it is the truth that's out there. It's more that they're bringing it to this pagan world is doing what we've been talking about. It's putting an end to the native magics, and through the actions of the priests of Jad, it is bringing into a truth or reality this new kind of supernatural uh, uh, truth. I thought that part was a really a meatier exploration of these themes of magic
Yep.
than the fairy stuff for me.
Yep.
Good. Go ahead, you go first, Erin, and then
I was
I'll.
just gonna say a quick thing on that. Like one thing I don't like, I love Mieville, and I see what you're saying in terms of the weird. I don't think that's what Kay was going for with this though, because one
No,
thing
I
that
agree. I
stood
agree with
out to
that.
me was the Kingail and the fairies share the same language. And I
That's
thought that was
exactly
Yes.
what I was going to
important,
say. Yeah.
right? Like there's this really important link, right, between the two of them. So they're not meant to be 100% alien, like there is like a kinship there. But on Kenyan and that point, I agree with you. I love this aspect, and I love the idea of the teachings make it so. It's not that the teachings reflect this static outer reality, but that also breaks my heart
Yeah.
because I'm
Yes.
not on the Jad side. I am on the folk side, right? And so, and I really love the character of Kenyan, and I hate that he's the one bringing us about in this world. And I hope that Kay wants us to have those mixed feelings. Like, I hope that that's very intentional, that we have this character that we are meant to really, really admire because he's just so good at his job almost, right? But
Keenan's conflicted
is
too.
bringing is basically civilizing the island, and I mean that in a very bad way, frankly,
Mm.
right? And bringing these
Yeah,
Christian doctrines to this rich, wonderful world.
Yeah, so for me, the point, and I was going to mention as well that the fairies speak the same language as the Kungail, but an older form of it,
Yes.
meaning maybe at some point actually the Kungail learned the language from the fairy, right? To me, the presence of the half world as it's described across all these books is meant to remind us of a part of ourselves that we deny, a part of ourselves that we cover up, that we're uncomfortable with. And that is our connection to the world, to nature, to something more primal, which we in our civilized lives pretend isn't part of us, right?
Mm.
So the fact that there are these echoes and these similarities, I think that's very deliberate, actually. That there's a magic in the world which we deny ourselves because we deny our connection to it. And we're meant to see ourselves in it in these moments where Alan realizes, oh, it's the same language, but you speak this archaic version of it, you know. So that's just,
that's really well said. That's
yeah,
really well said,
Yeah,
Philip.
that's also making me think about Kendra, like when she goes to the forest. Do you think
yes,
that that's an example of what you're talking about? Like her
100%
confronting that? Mhm.
beautiful example, actually. Yes, Kendra is and of course, she's growing up with Aldred. We haven't talked about him a whole lot yet.
Oh, we got to talk about him. We
Gotta
got to
talk
talk
about.
about him.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Really
Because
quickly about Kenyon, really, I just want to acknowledge that maybe this is part of him doing well with his job. I don't know, but there are so many times in this book where he is trying to de-escalate conflict, where he's trying so hard, and he usually fails, or sometimes he succeeds. But I actually started to feel for him after a while. I'm like, oh, this guy, he's always trying to be a peacemaker and really struggling to do that job well.
yeah, yeah, and he's got all this great conflict in him too about
Mm-hmm.
the fairy world and his religion and all that. But anyway, yeah, let's talk about Aldred and company and
Can
the
can I say that jumping off of Aaron's point, none among us are Jadites. Okay, so we can all we can all sympathize with that. But there is a point here with Eldred that is and that I think is maybe my favorite part of the book. It is his yearning to bring to bring his culture up to the level
Yes.
of cultures that existed prior to his, which he saw on his he had time and he spent time in Rhodius, and he passed by the church that Crispin
yes,
made the mosaic, and he looked at. So those connections are amazing. Um, but the question is opened in the conversations with him and Keenan, and it's I think meant to make us think is that is there something unifying about a Jadite conversion of a full people that disparate land-based native pagan magics can't accomplish? And does that conversion of Jad to the entire continent or the entire country make possible the innovations and the beauties of the kinds of cultures that Eldred admires and is trying to bring about there. That to me is the real conflict because like I agree, like to me the folkloric magic is much more interesting and much more beautiful. But there is that question and there is that conflict there. And I really enjoyed that part of the book.
you know, if you're comparing it to Christianity as it spread throughout Europe, it was most certainly a means through which, because Christianity often brought literacy as well. So it was certainly a
Exactly, yeah.
means through which various kings could actually consolidate and even expand their power. By converting to Christianity, you make powerful allies. You give yourself a more efficient bureaucracy in order to make your kingdom more efficient, and there were many political advantages to becoming an I would assume Jadeite as well. But yeah, poor Aldred really, and this is very close to what Alfred does as well, who he institutes so many, even as he basically struggles to even preserve the existence of I mean, Wessex was the last of the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms in the face of this Viking invasion, and he did have this amazing comeback, and he brought learning. And he made this system of burghs, and he built a navy, just like it's described in here. He did all these things, and he was dedicated to learning himself. And I love the moments that are so funny in here where he's having these discussions about Tricesian, obscure documents, and it's compared to like what other kings would be doing right now, where they'd be, post feast they'd be partying or whatever. And his idea of a good time is to talk about these Tricesian obscure
He
documents.
gets us. He
Yeah,
gets us.
yeah. This is Alfred. This is, I mean, he started, the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle. He translated Boethius's Consolation of Philosophy on by himself. He did all these things. So it's very much modeled after this character, but he is very much trying to build a civilization here, and that is, and you can see it in his character and everything else. But what you do see that older, more aggressive Anglo-Saxon warrior ethos as well when they go after the Yorm's Vikings that have invaded, and he has this Athelbert and the archers, okay, 10 of them right now, and he's like, okay, this guy is actually kind of scary too, isn't he? Right? I mean, he's also a warrior despite his afflictions and everything else. And Alfred, by the way, did have an affliction that no one at the time could explain as well. So a lot of interesting parallels.
Oh.
I mean, could I jump in on that for
Yeah.
a sec? Because I do, like, I love that. Like, I love this figure. I actually don't know a lot about this part of history. I wasn't, I, I will admit, I actually took a medieval course in my undergrad
Oh.
just because of the way things were
Oh my
structured.
Lord. Don't tell that to Philip.
So, it's definitely I'm more on the modern side of things. But it's fascinating, right? And the little bits I know, I just love. So I did love this aspect. I loved the glimpse of the illuminated manuscript. Again, I loved Kay's attention to the materials, right? So it's not just about the subjects of the books, it's the materials of the books and the manuscripts and whatnot. I really, really loved that. Um, but I think this connection that you're making, the one other part that I think he's adding there that I think is really meant to again make us think about these different cultures is that this learning and is only made possible by the kingdom being at peace. Right. So it's also
Yes.
about unions, but it's also about peace, right? And safety and this idea that, if a culture is struggling for survival, these other things can't be paid attention to, can't be focused on. And once there is that sense of peace, that's when a society can go in that direction. And so I do love this sort of transitional moment. And I do think that we are meant to be on the side of this sort of progress. And of course, I love literacy. I love books. That I am there. I'm just not always there.
We're
But the other
divided,
thing
aren't we? Yeah.
yeah, because at what cost, right? There's that element of it, I think. But the other element I love to go back to Kenyon in relation to this, and I think this is so well done. So he has a lot of sort of personal guilt about his going to that realm and asking for that favor to save the life of his dying wife. But he's the one who actually eases Eldred's guilt over that.
Yes.
Like he's the one who helps Kendra be okay with her sort of link to that. And he's the one who helps, oh, what is her name? The wife,
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Eldred's
Eldred's
wife as
wife.
well, Elswith or Elswith, I'm not sure how to pronounce that. And like her desire, we find out that her desire to retreat to a convent is partially her wanting to save her husband's soul because of his link to this half world. And it's Kenyon who sort of smooths all that out by saying like it's not your fault, like yes, you should pray, yes, you should do things and these things, but these things also exist. I feel like maybe it was part of that conversation Evan brought up, but it's this idea that he's able to give them a grace he doesn't give to himself. in allowing them to deal with that guilt, and in
Mm.
some ways perhaps criticize the guilt that comes with Jadism. And I really loved that element of the story.
Oh, that's beautifully said.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that the point you're making about peace is the reason that he makes one of the Viking lords a vassal
Yes.
instead of continuing his domination, which is I think criticized by some other characters in the book. The fact that he does that by small characters, and that's what it takes. You know that kind of and Philip can correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't Danelaw that whole area
Yep.
uh, uh, of of what is now England and the Britain, that was a completely different culture from what Alfred was building on the west side of Britain.
Right.
And so
Well,
you
they
have that
converted,
period.
part of the treaty was they did convert to Christianity, just as here.
Okay.
So yeah, what's the character's name? He doesn't really appear, but Ingmar,
Ingmarsson,
Ingmar
Ingerson.
Sigurdsson, and then his son Hakon does appear in order to sort of explain why the tribute hasn't arrived. Right? That was a kind of a cute. Poor Hakon's heart must have been broken. We don't see that though, because Kendra goes off and marries Alan instead of him, but he'll get over it, I'm
Oh
sure.
yeah, Hacken. He
Yeah.
was playing with the kids. He was playing with the siblings.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah, but yeah, they're analogous to the Danelaw in many respects. And Guthrum and company did convert to Christianity when Alfred won his battle and said, okay. And then Alfred's descendants, which may be informative for this world, I don't know, but his descendants eventually did reconquer the Danelaw. So that's when you actually get England for the first time. The whole concept of England
Yeah.
really isn't until Alfred's son and grandson really conquer the Danelaw, and then that's when England is unified. Which kind of you could say the Vikings helped unify England into becoming one kingdom. Because before the Vikings arrived, there was the Heptarchy, the seven kingdoms that were always at each other's throats, really. So, but yeah, cool
Mm.
stuff. And you know, there are some really great moments in the story that we can talk about if you want, but the whole chasing the deception by Ivar in order to get his vengeance, in order to at first I was like, I'm not sure I'm convinced of this. Like, wait, so he told them that Alfred's kingdom was vulnerable, that these burgs were unfinished, that the Navy shipyard was vulnerable. They could have a nice big raid, and he did that because he wanted them to go all the way over to where the Kingail are afterwards. I wasn't convinced necessarily of Ivar's plot there, but then later it just seemed like, yeah, this is a guy who just likes wreaking havoc. He's kind of a Loki like figure in here. Like he just likes
Mm.
making a mess of things and watching and torturing people. And he's more interested in perfecting the art of blood eagling someone than he is in actual like coherent plots, really, I think.
I liked the conversation about the blood eagling, by the way, because one of the characters, one of the Viking or Erlings, talks about how he is bringing it has to be done for a certain cause, or there's a certain code of
Right.
honor when it comes to who is going to be
A
blood
ritual.
eagled.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that if you just go on blood eagling people, it loses its significance, and it's almost dishonorable to the Erlings to do what he did.
Yeah.
So I appreciated that conversation. And also I there was a character, an Erling character, Otley, I think is the name. I could be wrong about that, but
Uh-huh.
there was a character who punched him and tried to stand up to him, and then that character he ends up dying at a certain point. I think I want to say that Aldred and his people surround him, and he doesn't surrender where his other people are, and he ends up having to die. And he dies standing too. I think that's another thing about the Erling culture. And I was sad because even though he was like the most minor character, very minor character in this story, I actually really liked him. And so, yeah, I don't know. I just wanted to mention him.
Yeah,
But
pour one
yeah.
out for Otley, man.
Yeah,
He stuck to his ideals there.
he
Should we
did.
talk about the vignettes?
Yeah, let's do
Sure,
it. Yeah, there's so
let's do
many of
it.
them. Yeah.
Because I'd love to hear what Joanna has to say about that and the rest of you. Um, I I like them. I like them. I mean, it is clearly this narrator sticking out his head and saying, these are I'm going to show my omnitemporality by moving so much forward in time and showing how these small characters are affecting this larger story, and how they the view we're having here is a limited view, limited in time and limited in, despite the number of characters we've all talked about and oddly not getting the screen time that we wanted, there are even so many more characters that we're never going to see, and that they have a role to play in what, in a great quote, he says, is sometimes events given in a saga or idyll tale move towards what may seem be seen as a resolution, and those in the midst of what is unfolding will have a sense, uh, even at the time of acceleration, breathlessness, urgency, and speed. Often, however, this emerges only in looking back, an awareness long after the fact as to how many strands and lives had been coming together or breaking apart at the same time. Men and women will wonder at how they did not perceive these things and be left with a sense that chance, accident, or miraculous intervention lay at the heart of the time. It is the humbling, daunting nature of this truth that can lead us to our gods when pace and press subside. So he's
Yes.
clearly talk about chaos.
Yes. And it makes me think about the what you and Alan were talking about with the Serenity Mosaic, about those constant looking back and, oh, that mattered or whatever. Upon looking back, I could see why that was important or whatever.
So did these work for you guys? Did you enjoy those moments?
Oh, can I really quickly chime in before we answer that question?
Yes, of
I did
course.
find the quote that I was talking about.
Oh, go for
Oh,
it.
So I'll go ahead and read it out loud. I have to use my chaste voice when I do this, so be forewarned. At the margins of any tale, there are lives that come into it only for a moment. Or, put another way, there are those who run quickly through a story and then out along their paths. For these figures, living their own sagas, the tale they intersect is the peripheral thing, a moment in the drama of their own living and dying. So, yeah, I felt like right away, I'm like, okay, like I kept thinking of that quote whenever we had these little vignettes of these characters. Okay, go ahead. What did you all think about those?
Yeah, I was just, by the way, picturing Guy Gavriel Kay saying that in your voice, Joanna. So,
When I was reading A Brightness long ago, that's the voice I kept hearing over and over again. I think I immersion read it, so the audiobook narrator has that kind of voice too whenever he says those chaos quotes. But
what
But there's a point.
pages?
There's a point. There's a point to be made about Joanna's style of reading there, which is that there can be a tendency for this to tip over into a kind of self-seriousness that is not convincing, or maybe too cute by half. And he's on a knife's edge a lot of the time, where I'm all in for a little essayistic moment from the narrator, but not, sometimes I'm like, I get to a moment of eye rolling or just thinking to myself, okay, well, then just show me this, dramatize it, and maybe he already has, and maybe the essayistic moment is like overkill, and I should have been able to get that from the dramatized moments of the text. But in the way Joanna was reading that, I was just thinking, yeah, maybe it doesn't work if it's just read straightforward.
I
there are
mean, I
just so
love,
many of them.
yes.
Go
Yes.
ahead.
I love the image of the knife's edge though, because I do find that some of them really work and then
Hmm.
some of them really don't for me. And one that I sort of wanted to point out because it was one of those moments where I was like, did you really need to tell me? Like, can sometimes you just trust your reader? Can
Yeah.
sometimes that be a thing that
Mm.
happens? And I think it was the moment when Kendra went into the woods and tried to sort of yell to the fairy. And of course, the fairy's already gone. She's like followed them or whatnot. And there's this long, I'm not going to try to find it, but there's this very long sort of philosophical, and sometimes events have no meaning and they don't have impact. And I'm like, we know. Like,
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
can we, like, I understand, but like sometimes give us a little bit more sort of grace, I guess. And I guess this is actually okay. I'm going to put on fair warning, this is a little complainy section. As much as I loved a lot of stuff, this is a complaining section because it is linked to both Ivar and the vignettes and that moment. Um, and the thing with the vignettes, because that's sort of what we're on, is for the most part, I love them. I love this sort of thing. I love getting a glimpse of a life. I love the idea that in this world, there are so many stories happening, and we've just happened to like focus in on these particular ones, but all of these sort of stories are happening in the background. So I think that is great. And for the most part, they really work. But I really, really hated that he felt the need to bring sexual violence into one of them.
Mm.
Mm.
Like the one with the person, like the fiance who loses his hand, and then they're like she's assaulted on the road, but the fiance like killed it, and like that particular one, it just it made me angry basically, because I'm like I just didn't why. Like there were so many other ways for this sort of now disabled husband to like to save her, to redeem himself, to sort of do something that showed his value, which I think was an important point in that small vignette. But did it have to be and pretty like actually described sexual violence, which you don't actually get a lot of in K. So it really felt jarring to me in a way that just didn't fit with the rest of it. And I had to wonder why that was chosen. Because all of the other ones I love. Like I loved the sister that we already alluded to, who her sister had been blood eagled before, and she heard them in the mist, and she did like I loved all of these like many of the other elements, but that one just like stood out for me as just jarring. It didn't seem to fit, and I didn't understand the thought process behind it.
Yeah. I can remember in that particular one, not just because of the nature of it, but just thinking, wait, this one just kind of came out of nowhere in a way. And so yeah, that one I can agree with. For the most part, they do work for me though. I'm reading a series right now, an author actually very much inspired by Guy Gavriel Kay in some respects, Christopher Rocchio's Sun Eater series. And I know Johanna's read the first one, but it's a series where it's first person, but he does a similar thing all the time where he'll interrupt the main narrative to go off on some philosophical tangent. But it's endearing because it's this Hadrian Marlowe is the name of the character. That's his nature. He's being Hadrian now. He's getting all philosophical. And it's almost like you enjoy that because it's part of this character. Whereas here, it's a third person narrator. So it may be a little harder to get away with in a sense with the third person narrator. But I'm so used to it now that I expect it
Yeah, yeah.
decayism, and then now I'm finding it to be almost endearing in a similar kind of way, where okay, we're gonna go off on this theme that Guy Gavriel Kay is obviously very interested in because we talked about it in all the other previous books, and I enjoy that. I mean, I'm somebody who's obsessed with storytelling too and the way
Yeah.
stories work and how what gets erased and what gets included and what gets transformed and how we intersect and all of the and how we reflect each other. And so I love it when he gets into these things for the most part. So they work for me. And at this point, I do regard it as a fun kind of indulgence, I guess, in a
Yeah.
way. But it's something that I'm enjoying as I read through his books.
Well, there's a we're all Malazan readers here, right?
Yeah.
So
Mm.
we know that there's a certain part in the eighth book where a major figure arrives in a place, and then there is a series of vignettes that are
Mm.
really well done. One of my favorite parts of that book, Told Hounds, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Mhm. Totally.
And I in this book like the vignettes more than the philosophizing.
Hmm.
Um, uh, I because they both break the they both, but like we talked about with Lord of Emperors, they both break the close third person that we have with our very large list of characters. And as we've talked about with probably every single book so far, Kay loves to take narrative risks. He loves to take risks with the form of his stories. And, you can't expect him to hit 100% because they're risks. That's the whole point, or for it to work with every single person, every single time. And so I always love that he is a risk taker in this way. And even with the character from the Jormsviking town, I'm pretty sure when we return to her at the very end, and she gets the booty
Sure.
from Byrne. She just opens that business, and doesn't he go through the rest of her life real quick to the very end to her death? I think he does. Maybe I'm wrong.
You might be right.
Um,
Oh, that sounds, yeah,
I think so.
yeah,
yeah.
he
I
At
shoots
least we
I've
get
forward. I
been
mean,
more.
into
it's
Yeah.
just
future.
these moments of okay, these people have a relevance to the story. This is their relevance to their story, and then we're going to shoot forward in time and see, what actually happens to these people. And it's cool.
Mm.
It does give you that moment of, okay, I'm not right here embedded in the events of the story. There's a larger, broader picture that's being painted. And so, yes, like I said, I think the vignettes work for me more than some of the philosophizing in this book.
I'm really curious about the philosophizing now that you're bringing that up, Evan, because I wonder what this story would feel like tonally if we didn't have those insertions.
Hmm.
Because I don't know, and this could be completely inaccurate. I didn't make a deep study of it, but intuitively speaking, when I was reading the book, aside from those passages, I felt like this read a little more straightforward prose-wise. And I was wondering if that was to reflect the atmosphere of this more harsh, rugged terrain or world. And maybe in keeping with what you were talking about with Norse, maybe, I don't know,
Yeah.
Philip, but it felt different to me than other K books prose-wise, except for those insertions, which I was like, oh, this is okay, you know?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's just a thought because I feel like those insertions are how he tries really hard. He pushes or flexes that melancholic tone pretty hard.
You said a couple really perceptive things there, and one I totally agree about the prose, where it is maybe he is trying to reflect that more stark, culture with a simpler
Stark
prose
is a good word for it.
into his
Yes.
sections. But also your point about the take out the philosophical moments, take out the little vignettes, and what are you left with? And I have a feeling you would lose more than you would think. I think a lot of the tone and the atmosphere from these books comes from those very things. And one of the reasons I feel like I'm getting to know this author through these books, this is what he does. This is part of the
Yeah.
beauty of his storytelling. They're actually a vital part of this whole experience. And they're part of what prompt me to think about these books afterwards. After I put these books down, I'm still thinking about these little narrator moments where he's wondering about lives and intersecting and that and this and the other thing. So, Erin, were you going to say something?
Yeah, can I? Well, it's actually a question for you, showing
Okay.
my ignorance of these sagas and whatnot. Because I'm wondering, like hearing everything, I'm wondering if the reason that they're a lot more present in this one is an attempt to bring in that sort of oral culture. So like the form that would be in the sagas, right? Like so like
Yeah.
to bring in the storyteller more explicitly and still keep it as like a K feeling book and still, but like it's that what I sort of alluded to in the non-spoiler section, it's that combination of the genre with the K style that is so important. So it's not just about the setting, it's about how the story is being told. And so this one required more of those, the storyteller guiding the reader, because that's what the sagas and like the ones sort of like speaking the sagas would have done.
Hmm.
Is that
Yes, absolutely.
scan?
So
Mm.
the Eddic poetry came out of an oral formulaic tradition, as the later skaldic poetry also did. The skaldic poetry being a little more elaborate, but basically based in many ways on the Eddic poetry. Um, and I feel like you may have, as I read those in the beginning, felt a difference in tone there with the Eddic poetry, very stark, very almost harsh, and that kind of thing. Um, and then the other being the Welsh triad, reflecting a more tonally speaking, a more, I guess, poetic culture, you could say, a little more elaborate and that sort of thing. So I think that a lot of the tone of the book in places is taking a cue from those earlier sources for sure, and both emerging from oral formulaic tradition, whereas the Alfred parts or the Aldred parts uh, definitely a push toward a more civilized, literate culture. You see Aldred wishing everyone in his kingdom could read, right? That's not far from, the Alfred of his time, who was really pushing literacy on people and that kind of thing. So, but yeah, I think we're getting close to wrapping up. Any final thoughts from any of you guys on any aspects of Last Light of the Sun?
As is always the case, even when I don't love a K book, and I have loved plenty of them, um, I love chatting with you guys about it because sometimes it's a matter of him bringing up ideas that are big and meaty and interesting and not for me embedding them well enough into the story, but the ideas are still there. And I love just chatting about the things that he brings up. And I get in this case, you know, so much context from Philip in terms of the historical basis of this, which I'm also not very familiar with, but also from the comments of Joanna and Erin. I've learned so much in this chat, and I never walk away from these with anything more than gratitude for what I learn.
All right.
Yeah.
Final thoughts from you two, Erin and Joanna. And want to go first, Erin?
I guess
Oh,
I'll go
sure.
first then.
Okay,
Yeah,
I'm
Joanna,
go
you
sorry. I
go
know.
ahead.
for it.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll try to make this brief. Likewise, I got so much out of talking with all three of you. Thank you so much for having me, Philip and Evan and Erin. Always a pleasure. This was illuminating for me. And I guess I'll quickly say about the end, I did feel like it wrapped up very conveniently when it came to all the romantic couplings that happened.
Always, always.
And even with
Yeah, that's
Rhiannon, like
yeah.
Rhiannon got
Yeah.
rejected, but then she didn't have to feel rejected longer than 5 minutes because so just something I noticed. But no, I really did appreciate this discussion immensely. So thank you so much for having me.
Okay. Final thoughts, Erin?
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna, echo the same, and it's appreciating the discussion, and it's also I find these discussions, yes, they help me understand things more and whatnot, but they always make me like the book more. Like I always
Yeah, me
come in
too.
with these
Me too.
criticisms, and then I hear what other people are saying, and I'm like, well, maybe that wasn't like a bad thing. Maybe actually, like, and so I love being sort of convinced that the way I was reading it, I was missing something, right? And then
Yes.
that I just that feels really good to have that conversation.
100%.
Yeah.
Especially for, and this is why I wanted to do a K book and commit to a K conversation that I didn't like it very much when I first read it, but I wanted to see what the effect would be of rereading it and then talking about it with you all. And I appreciate it so much more. Like I just, I'm so glad that we were able to do that. So thank you for inviting me. And I look forward to seeing the future videos as you all read through and get to the next ones because it's so much fun.
Thank you, Erin. Yeah, I believe
And
that.
now Philip is going to rank all the Guy Gavriel books he's read. Go.
No, 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 no.
I can't wait to watch that video.
So this may actually be my favorite GGK book.
Wow.
Wow.
Which, I admit there's some bias involved in that. But I also think that even if I weren't a medievalist and a nut about Old English poetry and sagas and all that stuff, I love the ending of this. I love Thorkel's sacrifice in this, the nature of his,
Mm.
I do tend to like narratives where you have a character who's very flawed, but does something very noble in the end. And for me, that was Thorkel. If any, there's no main protagonist in this, really, as there usually isn't in a GGK book. He mixes it up that way, which is something I appreciate about his writing. But if there was, I would nominate Thorkel because he seems to me the character who brings about the resolution in a way with a lot of assistance from the female characters, particularly in here with Enid and early on saving his life, and then everybody pitches in here and there. But his resolution to, and yeah, you could say it's may have been compensating for the fact that he was a terrible father. I love those moments of reflection when he thinks about, yeah, there was that one time when I was sort of half drunk and I was telling him about how to fight and all that. And it's fun because Baron he thinks, yeah, he probably never thinks about that. But then we know Baron does think about it because we have him
Mhm.
thinking about the very same moment in their lives together. And it had you never know what the things you do the impact they'll have on other people. They may be remembering that years later. But Thorkel's resolution to make a good end, and to do something noble with his life, and he really does make it possible for all parties to go their way there in that moment by deliberately throwing that fight at the end, even though he probably could have, taken.
And giving the raid suggestion, his last
Yes,
word is the
yeah,
raid suggestion that actually leads to the wealth that
yeah. Go
Burn
to
Poor,
Champierre.
Champierre
That's
was.
his last
poor
word.
French. Poor French.
Yeah.
They got the bad end of the stick on this
But even
story.
Baron realizes, yeah, I don't think I like raiding and killing and all that. I think I'll retire now. And he leaves the Yorms Vikings and deliberate. He throws his fight too, in a sense. I mean, he doesn't do exactly the way his father does, but he says, "Yep, okay, you're in, buddy," to the guy who's trying to join. He's like, "Yep, I'm out," and everybody agrees to it, and he goes his way, and he gets together with Anrid, which is great, and Mom's gonna be all right too, there. So
It's kind of like Ivar at the end of Lions of Aurzon. Is that the right character's name?
Ivar was in this one. Were you thinking of
Oh, I can't think of his name. I'm sorry.
a
The
character?
guy we get the prologue at the end and he decides he doesn't want to be a fighter. He's the young guy. The
Oh
young guy.
yes, 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 yes. In Lions, yeah. Oh
What's
well,
his name? I can't remember. I'm so
yeah,
sorry.
he's an important character.
Yeah.
I love that epilogue, and I love that epilogue in Lions.
Yeah.
It's so
But yeah,
good.
but I mean he proved himself and yet at the same time he decided that's not what he wants to do with his life and
Yeah.
gets
He becomes a
married.
cleric or
Becomes
something.
a
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So we got that nice little resolution there, and
Mhm.
Just another part of the Jadverse.
Yeah.
but thank you all. This is so much fun, Erin. This is, I think, the last time you're joining us
Yep,
for this.
No!
I
yep, it
know.
is.
Yeah. But thank you so
Wow.
much. You've been such a wonderful part of all of this. Evan
No,
and I
thank
both
you.
really appreciate you. And Joanna is going to be coming back for more discussions,
Yes.
so more to come. But we're going to be joined by other lovely people. What's up next, guys? I believe it's
Isabel,
Isabel.
right?
Isabel.
Yeah. So I don't know what that's about even. It sounds like the name of a protagonist, though. Is it a female protagonist in this one? Isabel? Am I guessing right?
Don't spoil it.
Okay.
We'll find out.
All right. Well, we're looking forward to that. So we'll be getting together the GGKR. We'll be getting together in about a month or so from now with Isabel. So don't forget to join us for that. But that is it for us for now. And if I can find the stop recording button,
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
um,
Bye.
let me see here. Oh, there it is. Bye.